There's a certain kind of woman who won't feel anything for you until you disappear. Not because she's broken, not because she's cruel, but because she doesn't know how to feel safe with love unless it's slipping through her fingers. You could give her consistency, honesty, devotion, and watch her grow colder with every act of kindness. But the moment you turn your back, the moment you say, enough, something in her heart flinches awake. Like love can only be real if it hurts. You've seen it. You've felt it. You were soft, so she froze. You distanced yourself, and suddenly she cared. But by then, a part of you was already gone. No one wants to say this out loud, that some women, not all, but some, are addicted to the ache of love, not the presence of it. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So let's make it conscious. Let's talk about the pain behind this pattern. The reason love only feels real when it's being chased. The reason some women can't feel intimacy unless they're afraid of losing it. The reason you felt like you were always too much when you were finally enough. This isn't about blame. This is about the emotional blueprint we inherit from our pain, especially the kind we never name. See, when you met her, you weren't trying to play games. You wanted to show her something different. You wanted to be the man who didn't make her question her worth every 5 minutes. The man who called when he said he would. The man who saw her fully and stayed anyway. But the more love you gave her, the more uncomfortable she seemed. She picked fights over nothing. She pulled away when you got close. She told you she needed space, but seemed jealous when you gave it. She accused you of being too clingy, too intense, too emotional. And yet, when you finally detached, she showed up with softness you'd never seen before. It felt like emotional whiplash, and it was. But this wasn't about you being too much. It was about her being trained by life, by past wounds, maybe even by childhood, to equate love with loss, affection with unpredictability, safety with boredom. So when you offered her peace, it felt unfamiliar. And what is unfamiliar to the wounded psyche is often mistaken for danger. Jung taught us that the psyche will always seek the familiar, even if the familiar is chaos, even if the familiar is abandonment. So if love, to her, always came with emotional distance, she may need distance to feel love. And I know that sounds twisted. It is twisted, but not maliciously, not consciously. She might not even realize it. She might just say, "I don't know, I just don't feel that spark anymore," or "You're such a great guy, I'm just not ready," or worse, "I need a man who keeps me on my toes." But let's decode that. What she's really saying is, your presence feels threatening because it's consistent, and consistent love feels boring because I never learned to trust it. I only know how to feel desire when I'm scared I might lose it. And if you're honest, part of you knew this, part of you saw it. The little ways she recoiled from your love, the slight glaze in her eyes when you spoke your truth, the way she seemed to light up when you stopped trying. You told yourself she just needed time, that maybe if you loved her a little harder, she'd finally believe it. But here's the quiet tragedy. The more available you became, the less valuable she felt. Because in her inner world, love isn't something you receive, it's something you earn. Earn through pain, earn through sacrifice, earn through chasing someone who withholds it. So when you made it easy, it felt unearned. And unearned love, to a wounded woman, feels fake. She might not have said that. She might not have known it, but her body knew. Her nervous system flinched at your warmth the same way someone flinches at a hug after years of cold shoulders. So what did she do? She tested your boundaries. She withheld affection. She made you question your worth, not because you lacked it, but because she couldn't hold it. And the moment you gave up, the moment you pulled away, not to punish her, but to protect yourself, that's when she remembered how much she missed you. Because in your absence, she could finally feel the longing again. And longing is what she's used to calling love. But you're not here to be longed for. You're not here to perform emotional gymnastics just to be appreciated. You're not here to become the distant man just to be desired. Because let's be honest, you can play that role. You have. You know how to withdraw your warmth to create attraction. You know how to become unavailable and watch them come running. But doesn't it feel hollow? Doesn't it eat at you to know that you're being loved only in your absence? Doesn't it rot your soul to have to manipulate your way into being valued? That's not intimacy. That's trauma bonding. And Carl Jung was right. If you don't make these patterns conscious, they will keep running your life. You'll keep attracting women who can only love through pain. You'll keep falling for the chase. You'll keep mistaking inconsistency for passion, avoidance for mystery, emotional neglect for emotional depth, until one day, you'll realize you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. Not because she's a villain, but because she hasn't yet faced the part of herself that confuses peace with danger, love with fear, closeness with suffocation. And if she hasn't faced that part of herself, she will sabotage anyone who gets too close, including you. So maybe it's not about pulling away to win her back. Maybe it's about pulling away to come back to yourself, to stop chasing people who only see your value when it's fading, to stop romanticizing the ones who punish your availability, to stop shrinking into a colder version of yourself just to feel loved by someone who can't hold warmth. Maybe the real question isn't, why does she love me more when I pull away? Maybe the real question is, why do you stay somewhere that only loves you when you're gone?
Do you ever feel like someone finally sees the part of you you've always hidden? Here, you don't have to hide anymore. You're safe now. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so we can keep walking this path together. Thank you.
There's a kind of grief that doesn't wear black, doesn't speak at funerals, doesn't have a name. It's the grief of giving love to someone who only felt it when you stopped. And no one tells you how heavy that is. No one prepares you for the emotional vertigo of being punished for showing up, then rewarded for pulling away. So you start questioning everything. Was I too much? Was I smothering her? Was I actually annoying the way she made me feel? You don't realize it at first, but the slow drip of her distance turns into an echo in your mind. It repeats itself when you try to open up again. It whispers in your next relationship, don't be too honest. Don't be too eager. Don't scare her off. So, you tone yourself down, not because you want to, but because you learned it's safer to be misunderstood than to be rejected for being real. And that's the quiet agony most people never see in men like you. The silence after the phone call she never returned. The breath you held every time you texted first. The half-smile you forced when she said she wasn't sure about you, about herself, about everything, and somehow you still stayed. You tell yourself, maybe if I just stay patient, she'll come around. Because you've seen glimpses of her softness. You felt her heart before it disappeared behind that wall. And you think, maybe I can love her into healing. But that's the trap, isn't it? You saw her potential and mistook it for her presence. And every time she pulled away, your mind didn't register rejection. It registered a test, like you had to prove yourself worthy of the love she was withholding. That wasn't love. That was your inner child trying to earn what should have been freely given. That was your nervous system responding to inconsistency the way it always has, by adapting, people-pleasing, over-explaining, shrinking, becoming more digestible, more palatable, less threatening. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere, a long time ago, someone taught you that stable love isn't real. That closeness comes with conditions, that you must perform to be kept. So when a woman pushes you away, part of you is hurt, but another part of you is activated. Because you know this game. You've played it before, even if you didn't realize it. You just didn't expect to play it again with someone you thought was different. But now, the cycle is here again. You give. She retreats. You chase. She resents. You detach. She returns. You reconnect. She pulls away again. Each time, your self-respect erodes a little more. And the hardest part isn't even the rejection. It's the confusion, the whiplash, the way she acts like you're everything one day and too much the next. One moment, she's planning a future. The next, she's not ready. One week she says you're safe. The next, she disappears for 3 days without explanation. And you're left in the dark, trying to find a shape in the silence. No one warns you that emotional inconsistency feels like intimacy when you're used to abandonment. No one tells you how addictive it becomes to be loved in intervals, because the drought makes the drops feel like rain. But here's what really haunts you. You started forgetting what you even wanted. At some point, your focus shifted from, do I feel seen and held, to, how do I get her to stay? You stopped asking, is this love? And started asking, how can I be enough? And that's the unspoken tragedy of loving someone who only loves when you leave. You became a version of yourself you didn't recognize, walking on eggshells, filtering your emotions, smiling when you were exhausted, staying quiet when you were hurt. Because the truth is, you weren't just afraid of losing her. You were afraid of losing the version of you that felt valuable in her eyes. You started confusing her validation with your worth. You started needing her approval to feel sane. You started believing that maybe, just maybe, if you figured out the perfect balance of closeness and distance, she would finally love you without retreat. But love that needs to be calculated is not love, it's emotional captivity. And you're tired of second-guessing yourself, tired of analyzing every text, tired of having to be less loving just to be loved. Because that's the real heartbreak, isn't it? When your light, your warmth, your consistency, your emotional presence becomes the very thing that scares them away. And what does that teach you? That love must be withheld to be respected. That being too available makes you disposable. That softness is dangerous. That sincerity pushes people away. But that's not love talking. That's trauma. Your trauma. Her trauma. Colliding in a cycle that feels romantic but is actually reenactment. And what makes it worse is that you can't even talk about it. Not really. Because the moment you say something, the moment you express pain, confusion, need, she pulls away more. She calls you sensitive. She says, "You're making it a bigger deal than it is." She might even say, "You're being dramatic." And you start believing her. You start editing your emotions before they leave your mouth. You start becoming smaller and smaller until you don't even recognize the voice inside your own mind. That voice used to say, "I deserve love that stays." Now it whispers, "Just don't scare her off." This is the unspoken struggle of the emotionally awake man. You're not broken. You're just aware. You're not needy. You just stopped settling for surface. You feel deeply. And you're surrounded by a culture that tells men like you to numb it, mask it, manipulate it into something more attractive. But the only reason you're hurting is because you kept showing up fully for someone who only knew how to love in fragments. And that doesn't make you weak. That makes you brave. Because anyone can play hard to get. But it takes a lion's heart to stay open when you're being met with confusion, silence, and emotional retreat. So if you're feeling lost right now, if your heart is scattered in the silence of someone who only loves when you're gone, know this: you're not crazy. You're not too much. You're not asking for the impossible. You're just tired of starving in relationships that only feed you when you stop asking for nourishment. And that exhaustion, that ache in your chest, it's not just heartbreak. It's your soul trying to return to a place where love doesn't have to hurt to feel real. Love, in its pure form, is terrifying. Not because it hurts, but because it reveals. It reveals every place inside you that doesn't feel worthy of being held. Every wall you built to survive. Every shadow you tried to bury beneath your smile. And the paradox is, the more someone truly sees you, the more those buried parts start to panic. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious, rejected self. And here's the hidden truth most people never realize. Some women can only feel love through emotional distance, because closeness threatens to expose the parts of them they've never faced. Not because they're cold, but because they were never taught how to feel safe in intimacy. They don't want to run. They just don't know how to stay. Because to stay means letting someone into the spaces they've kept locked their entire life. And that level of visibility doesn't feel like love. It feels like danger. That's the tragedy no one talks about. That some people, especially those with deep childhood wounds, don't fear rejection. They fear being seen. Because being seen means surrendering the mask. And the mask is what kept them alive. Maybe she learned long ago that being too close meant being hurt. Maybe the people who were supposed to love her only loved her when she performed, when she smiled, when she succeeded, when she shrank. Maybe she tried to be lovable and was punished for it. So she learned the rules of survival. Don't get too attached. Don't depend on anyone. Don't believe them when they say they won't leave. And when you showed up with stability, her system didn't register it as safety. It registered it as a lie. Because if love never stayed before, why would it now? This is how the psyche protects itself. By distorting reality to match the trauma it already knows. So even if you gave her nothing but truth, she would doubt you. Even if you held her through her silence, she would resent you. Even if you never wavered, she would flinch like you already had. Because to her, love is not a sanctuary. It's a setup, and your consistency doesn't feel like home. It feels like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Jung warned us, what we repress, we project. So the love she can't give herself, she will reject from you. The wounds she won't look at, she will blame you for poking. She might say, "You're too much." But what she really means is, your presence is forcing me to feel the parts of me I've disowned. That's not love. That's trauma in costume. And you, unknowingly, become the mirror she never wanted. Because you reflected back to her a version of love she never believed she deserved. That's why she loved you when you pulled away. Because distance gives her control, and control gives her safety. And safety, to the wounded mind, comes from predictable pain, not unpredictable love. It's easier to miss you than to face you. It's easier to chase you when you're gone than receive you when you're here. Because longing is familiar, but presence is a threat. So when you left, she suddenly felt, because the ache of absence makes her feel alive. But your closeness, your care, that demands a confrontation with self. And not everyone is ready for that. The real truth is this: she didn't pull away because you were too much. She pulled away because your love demanded she face the part of herself that always believed she was not enough. And that truth is unbearable to someone who hasn't done the inner work. Someone who's still living from the old wounds, the inner child that got abandoned, the subconscious belief that love equals loss. So what happens? She sabotages it. She tests you. She withdraws. She picks at your self-esteem until you question your value. Not because she doesn't see it, but because she doesn't believe she deserves it. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And that includes ruining good love. Because love, real love, is the ultimate exposure. It shows you where you're still hiding, where you're still afraid, where you still don't believe you are enough. And here's what no one tells you. If someone hasn't faced their shadow, they will attack the part of you that brings light to it. So the more emotionally open you are, the more emotionally unsafe they feel. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because their nervous system is wired for withdrawal. They only feel empowered when they're chasing, only feel wanted when they're earning it, only feel in control when love is at a distance. So when you show up, unconditionally, patiently, fully, you break the rules they've built their whole identity around. And in that moment, they must either evolve or run. Most will run, because evolution is painful. Healing feels like death to the ego. To accept your love, she would have to question her entire story, that she's hard to love, that closeness isn't safe, that if someone stays, it must be a trick. But the ego doesn't want healing. It wants familiarity, even if that familiarity is suffering. So no, it wasn't you. It was the war between her wounds and your love. And she chose the wounds, not because she wanted to, but because they were the only thing that felt like home. That is the hidden truth. And I know that doesn't make the pain go away. It doesn't erase the memories. It doesn't make your heart any less confused. But maybe, just maybe, it helps you see clearly that her inability to receive your love was never a reflection of its worth. Here's the part that hurts the most. You didn't just fall for her. You fell for the role you got to play when she needed you. You fell for the emotional highs of being wanted again. Every time you pulled away, you fell for the illusion that her pain somehow meant you mattered. And that's the part you don't want to admit, that as much as she chased a fantasy of love that would abandon her, you chased a fantasy of being the one who could finally make her stay. Because underneath it all, your calm, your depth, your emotional awareness, there's still a younger you, who once believed that if he could just love hard enough, he'd be chosen. That's the ego you don't want to talk about. The part of you that didn't just want connection, it wanted redemption, not just from her, but from every person who made you feel like showing up fully was too much. And in her, you saw a chance to prove them all wrong, to prove you were lovable, not because you were distant or mysterious, but because you were real. And maybe you were right, but maybe your ego hijacked the mission. Because while you were trying to love her, you were also trying to win, trying to fix, trying to be the man who could break her pattern. You didn't just want her to choose you. You wanted her to heal because of you. You wanted her to wake up and realize that she didn't have to chase anymore because love was finally here. And that's not evil. It's human, but it's still ego. Because love doesn't need to be proven. And worth doesn't need to be earned through someone else's breakthrough. Let's be honest, you stayed longer than you should have, not because she was healthy for you, but because walking away felt like failure. Because if you left, it would mean the story ended the same way again. And if the story ended the same, maybe you were the common denominator. So you tried harder, you gave more, you dimmed your needs, then shamed yourself for having them. You became the version of you she said she wanted, only to realize she didn't even want that. You bent over backwards to be emotionally available, but never asked if she had the capacity to receive what you offered. You gave her credit for potential and stayed long after the reality had expired. You called it love. But what if it was attachment? What if it was your ego, dressing up a wound in romance, saying, if I just love her the right way, this time I won't be abandoned. That's not your fault, but it is your pattern. And here's the truth. Some part of you needs to be needed, needs to be the savior, needs to be the one who stays calm while they lose themselves. Because that's how you've always felt valuable, by being the stable one in someone else's storm. But that's not love. That's a transaction. You give love. They give crisis. You feel important when they're lost. You feel chosen when they come back. But is that intimacy, or is that survival? The ego doesn't want peace. It wants a problem it can fix, because in fixing it, it feels necessary. And if you're necessary, you won't be left. That's the lie the ego tells you. And that lie is what keeps you in relationships where you're never fully seen. Because the moment you are, the role disappears. You've built your value on being the answer to someone else's confusion. And the moment they stop needing that, you feel invisible. So you don't just fear rejection, you fear irrelevance. That's why her silence cuts so deep. Not just because she didn't call, but because in her absence, you couldn't play your part. And without your part, you didn't know who you were. That's the identity you have to grieve. The identity of the emotionally intelligent fixer, the calm, patient healer, the one who always knows how to hold space, but rarely gets held in return. Because you taught yourself that love is being useful. You told yourself, if I'm strong enough, stable enough, wise enough, they'll never leave. But love doesn't work like that, because no amount of emotional intelligence can compensate for someone's lack of emotional capacity. No amount of patience can fix someone who's committed to misunderstanding you. No amount of presence will make someone stay if their wounds are louder than their desires. And the moment you base your self-worth on being the exception to their pattern, you've already lost yourself. Because love is not about becoming someone undeniable. It's about being someone authentic, even if that means being denied, even if that means walking away before they beg you to come back. Because here's the most brutal truth of all. Sometimes pulling away does make her love you. Not because she finally sees your worth, but because your distance reactivates her pattern. And her pattern isn't about love, it's about proving she can win. So don't mistake her return for revelation. Don't romanticize the I miss you that only comes after silence. You don't want to be loved by a wound. You want to be loved by a person. And if that person hasn't met their own shadow, they will only love you through distance, through longing, through pain. And if your ego still needs to be the one who fixes that, you're not in a relationship. You're in an emotional ego loop. It's time to break it, not with anger, not with blame, but with clarity. The part of you that thought love had to be earned was lying. The part of you that stayed to prove your worth was repeating a story. The part of you that thought her love would heal your wound was making her God. And she's not God. She's human, hurt, confused, just like you. But the difference is, you're awake now. And once you see the pattern, you can't go back to sleep. So yes, maybe she only loved you when you pulled away. But maybe you only loved yourself when she loved you. And that's the real break. It's not just about her. It's about the way you lost yourself trying to be lovable. It's about the way your ego used pain as proof of purpose. About the way your identity clung to being the safe space while your heart was starving. But you're not here to be needed. You're here to be known. And if someone can't love you when you're present, when you're soft, when you're clear, when you're not disappearing to create desire, then maybe what they're calling love is just their shadow clinging to the idea of you. And you deserve more than that. You deserve love that arrives, not love that only wakes up when you're leaving. So now you know. You see it, naked, without the story, without the justifications. It wasn't that she stopped loving you when you got close. It's that she never knew how to love someone who stayed. And it wasn't that you were too much. It's that you kept offering peace to someone addicted to chaos. But here's what matters now. What do you do with that truth? What do you do when the pattern has been exposed and your heart is still aching? Because truth alone doesn't heal. It demands something from you. It demands a death of who you thought you had to be to feel worthy. It demands that you stop waiting for her to see you. Stop shrinking, waiting for the one moment she says, "You were right, I just wasn't ready." Because even if she said it now, would it matter? Would it undo the years you spent molding yourself to be lovable? Would it erase the nights you stayed awake, rereading every message, searching for the part where you went too far? Would it repair the cracks you learned to ignore just to keep her comfortable? No. And that's the beginning of freedom. Not when she comes back, but when you stop hoping she will. When you stop needing her confusion to validate your clarity, when you finally realize that your love wasn't the problem. You didn't lose her because you cared. You lost her because she couldn't. And that doesn't make her a villain. But it does make you responsible now for what you allow, for how long you wait, for the parts of you that are still stuck in limbo, quietly hoping she might return as someone new. But she won't. Not because she can't change, but because you can't wait for her to. Because waiting for someone to become emotionally available is the most silent form of self-abandonment there is. You call it patience, but it's just permission for your soul to starve. You call it loyalty, but it's just fear, dressed up in romantic ideals. And I get it. Letting go feels like betrayal. Not of her, of the dream. Because you didn't just fall in love with her, you fell in love with who she could have been, if only she healed. But you can't date someone's potential. You can't build a future on the hope that they'll become the person your soul already is. That's how you lose years of your life, in a purgatory of what-ifs. And it's time to stop. Not with bitterness, not with resentment, with choice. This is the moment where you realize healing isn't just about grieving who hurt you. It's about grieving the version of you who kept accepting it. The version who thought love had to come with withdrawal. The version who believed distance meant desire. The version who thought chasing was proof of loyalty. That's who you're saying goodbye to, because you're not just walking away from her. You're walking away from every pattern that told you love was something you had to earn. You're walking away from the boy who only felt worthy when someone needed him. From the man who thought being steady meant being silent. From the soul who thought disappearing was the only way to be loved. And you're walking towards something terrifying, but real, self-honoring. The kind that says, if I have to pull away to feel loved, it's not love. If I have to chase, convince, or lose myself to keep someone, they're not mine to hold. The kind that knows you're not hard to love. They're just hard to receive. And maybe, just maybe, you start asking different questions now. Not, how can I get her back? But why did I abandon myself just to feel chosen? Not, how can I be less intense? But, why do I feel unsafe being fully expressed? Not, what if she was the one? But, what if I've never even met someone who could meet me where I already am? Because that's the real shift. It's not about walking away in anger. It's about walking toward a life where your love isn't a test, where your truth isn't a threat, where your presence isn't only felt in absence. It's about building a new standard, not for how others treat you, but for what you'll never again tolerate in the name of connection. And that means you stop chasing what could have been. You stop trying to prove yourself to someone who never saw you to begin with. You stop hoping for closure that will never arrive, and instead, you become the closure. By ending the cycle, by grieving the illusion, by reclaiming your voice. This is the turning point, where you don't just understand the pattern, you break it, where you stop romanticizing your own suffering, stop intellectualizing their avoidance, stop loving from your ego's need to feel irreplaceable, and instead, you come home to the man who doesn't need to disappear to be loved, to the soul that doesn't need to suffer to be worthy, to the truth that doesn't flinch under pressure. You become the one who stays with you. And when you do, you'll look back one day, not with bitterness, but with a kind of quiet gratitude. Not because she loved you right, but because her absence finally made you see that you didn't need to be less. You just needed to stop asking for breadcrumbs from someone terrified of the feast you offered. You'll stop asking if she's okay and start asking if you are. You'll stop holding space for her healing and start making room for your own. Because you're not here to fix anyone. You're here to remember who you were before you were taught that love means pain. You're here to love from fullness, not hunger, from clarity, not desperation, from wholeness, not performance. And now, you finally can. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. Carl Jung. So here we are. The old identity has cracked. The mask is in pieces. The story you told yourself about what it means to be a man, to be in control, to be desirable, to be untouchable, it's fallen apart. And underneath all of that, something ancient, something raw, something true. It doesn't speak in sound bites or status updates. It doesn't care about praise. It doesn't play games. It doesn't ask, am I enough? Because it already knows, I am real. That is the rebirth, not becoming someone new, but remembering someone you buried to survive. That quiet, powerful, honest self. The one who doesn't need to dominate to feel safe. The one who doesn't confuse being chosen with being worthy. The one who doesn't fear women, but meets them. Not as a role to fulfill, not as a prize to win, not as a storm to weather, but as a soul. A soul equal in power, in mystery, in depth. When that man rises, everything changes. Not because he tries harder, or gets it perfect, or finally cracks the code of what women want. No, everything changes because he stops performing and starts embodying. He becomes rooted, not in his opinions, not in his strength, in his essence. And essence cannot be threatened. Essence cannot be manipulated. Essence cannot be controlled, seduced, or shaken. Because essence is not a mask, it is presence. And presence? It's the most disarming thing a man can bring into the room. It's the thing no woman forgets. Not money, not muscles, not charm. Presence. The ability to sit with her grief without needing to fix it. The ability to hear her truth without making it about you. The ability to stay when every part of you wants to run. The ability to see her not as too much, but as exactly enough. Not because she's convenient, but because she's real. Because that's what you're loyal to now. Realness. You don't need her to shrink anymore because you've stopped shrinking yourself. You've stopped hiding behind, I'm just not emotional, or that's just how I am, or I don't do drama. You know what that was now. Fear. Pretending to be identity. And once you've faced that fear, really faced it, you become quiet, but not silent. Still, grounded, open. You speak less, but say more. You stop proving and start being. You stop seeking validation and start offering reverence. And the women who once confused you, the ones who seemed too wild, too emotional, too deep, they make sense now. Because you found that same wildness in yourself, that same depth, that same fire. You've stopped resisting the feminine. And because of that, you can now receive her. You don't flinch when she cries. You don't shrink when she roars. You don't run when she reflects the part of you that's still healing. You hold. You stay. Not because you're trying to be a good man. Because you are one, and not in the way the world defines good. You're not perfect. You're present. You're not agreeable. You're truthful. You're not performative. You're rooted. And when a woman meets that, she softens. Not because you made her, but because she's finally safe. Safe to be radiant. Safe to be real. Safe to be respected. And the you that's now watching her, he sees her. Not as an idea, not as a mirror, not as a test, as her. And in that moment, something ancient wakes up between you. Something beyond romance, beyond need, beyond words. A knowing, a remembering. You both feel it. That this is what love looks like after illusion, after projection, after ego. It's not flashy. It's not always fiery. It's something else. Sacred. And sacred doesn't mean perfect. It means true. It means you're no longer acting. You're here. Not hiding. Not manipulating. Not chasing. Meeting. Meeting the world. Meeting the moment. Meeting the feminine. Meeting yourself. And in that meeting, a new life begins. Not a life free from conflict, but a life free from pretending. A life where love isn't something you earn or control. It's something you offer. And what you offer now is real. Because you're real now. And that changes everything. So now, I ask you, will you keep waiting for her to remember your worth? Or will you finally remember it for yourself? Because if she only loved you when you pulled away, that wasn't love. That was your absence awakening her wounds, not her heart. And I know it's tempting to go back, to text one last time, to hope that this time it'll land, that this time she'll feel what you felt all along. But maybe that hope isn't love anymore. Maybe it's just your fear of being alone, wearing a familiar mask. So I'll ask again, will you keep loving in a way that requires you to vanish? Or will you finally love in a way that allows you to stay? Stay with your needs. Stay with your truth. Stay with your standards. Because someone, somewhere, is waiting for the version of you that doesn't disappear to be adored. The one who doesn't have to play dead to feel desired. And you won't find her while chasing ghosts. You won't find her inside another cycle of proving, pleasing, or performing. You'll find her the moment you no longer need her to fill the space you've now filled yourself. And when she arrives, she won't need distance to feel love. She'll need presence. She'll crave it, because it's what she lives in. But before you meet her, you have to meet yourself here, in this moment, in this truth, and choose to stop entertaining love that only knocks when you leave, to stop calling it fate when it's just repetition, to stop bleeding for people who treat your devotion like noise. You are not here to be loved in absence. You are here to be loved in full. And that starts with you choosing, once and for all, to stop walking back into the fire just to prove you can survive it. The world does not need another man who's mastered emotional starvation. The world needs a man who's fed himself wholeness and refuses to beg again. So let this be the last time you explain your heart to someone committed to misunderstanding it. Let this be the last time you confuse being chased for being cherished. Let this be the last time you disappear just to be found. You don't need to be found. You are already here, and the woman who is meant for you, she won't love you when you leave. She'll love you when you stay.